Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I do appreciate you joining the session that we're going to talk about today, which is finding purpose in retirement by starting anew, whatever you might choose to put in that blank, fill in the blanks.
All opinions and views expressed by the speakers are not representative of views and opinions of RBC Dominion Securities, Inc. All information and opinions provided in this video are in good faith, but without legal responsibility.
I do want to share that we've been, looking forward to this conversation, and as I spoke to a number of you as you registered, and I was hearing the curiosity and the concerns, it sort of helped me to determine how I would approach the discussion. The initial spark to do this webinar came from an article that I had read about the trend of retirees starting new businesses. And I can't recall exactly if it may have been a post from Susan, which is very possible, and as I spoke to more and more persons as they were registering, it became apparent to me that it wasn't really specifically about a new business per se, but about starting something new at a stage which can be intriguing, but also terrifying for people all at the same time. So today's discussion will be more of a fireside chat as opposed to the formal presentations that I've typically done in the past, and more about just the big picture concepts, not necessarily the specifics on how to approach the mechanics of starting a business in retirement. The key is to help you, the individuals, today approach the transition more than just thinking about the end of your work or career chapter, but with some clarity about the new things that you will be starting. In terms of the agenda, again, always try to keep it really brief, knowing that this is sort of the lunch hour for some individuals. Our aim is to get through the presentation, get through the conversation, and allow for Q&A by around 12:45, and then to conclude at 1 p.m. exactly. And if you are joining for the first time, I appreciate you taking the time. My name is Orlando. I'm an advisor here at RBC Dominion Securities. Been with RBC now for approaching 6 years, but been in the industry prior to that. I worked at another firm and also the practice there. Outside of that, I've spent time sharing my knowledge. I lectured for a few years at York University, and any opportunity I get to share what I continue to learn is one that I embrace, whether that might be with community, with the young people, with seniors. It's all something that I just enjoy doing. And outside of that, I'm kept busy with two little ones, son and daughter, 8 and 10 this year. So exciting times. Now, words are something that I think are very important, and I want to ensure that we're all on the same page and what we're going to be discussing. So I want to define a few words because, in the English language, there are times when we might use different words and we're describing the same thing. So, for example, some say potato, some say potato. Then there are times when we use words interchangeably, but they're actually distinct things. As an example, hot dog versus sausage. I am very guilty of just saying hot dog for anything that has that wiener shape, even if it might actually be a sausage. And I'm just using these examples to sort of connect the dot that in the world of finance, personal finance, we hear financial planning and retirement planning that are thrown out and used interchangeably by individuals in the industry as well as just the wider community. And we could say that a retirement plan is seen as a slice in a wider financial plan, almost like a slice in a pizza. However, there's been an evolution in the meaning of that term, right, of the word retirement, and it's shifted. And I've started to look at these as sort of two separate things, which is how we'll discuss it today. I would describe the financial planning exercise as everything that we're going to do that involves the money, the cash flow, the income, the expenses, the assets, the liabilities, how these are going to move over time, right? So that's the real data crunching, the Excel spreadsheet that individuals in my chair we focus on. While the retirement plan, we want you to think about everything except the money, which is how you're going to spend your energy, your attention, and your time. This area is the one that gets little attention for various reasons. And I want to shine a spotlight on it, and with the help of my panelists, because it is one that is really important. There are conversations that I come across individuals that share with me about their parents, how they got impacted when they retired and sort of lost their identity. So we're hoping that by getting individuals who are not yet there, or even if you just started, to be more prepared. Now, to help our panelists, I'm going to just ask a few questions. We're going to do a slider poll. That's going to help us to understand who's in the audience, what areas to focus on. So if you don't mind, go to slider.com. You can input that code, or you can use your phone and scan the QR code. And let me just share that quickly here. Okay, there we go. And the first question, let's just start from here. 1 second. There we go. So what does purpose mean to you in retirement? So when you think about purpose, what does it mean to you in retirement? Is it staying active and engaged? Is it doing meaningful work, learning and growing, helping others? What does that mean to you when you think about the word purpose? So far, staying active and engaged, and you might not be sure as yet. It might not be something that you've thought about, and that's also fine. So staying active and engaged, interesting. And why I say that interesting is because I'm looking at helping others and giving back, because sometimes in the industry, we make the assumption that everybody's going to want to sort of do volunteer work. So this is quite interesting. Okay. So I'm going to move on to the next one. Oh, I didn't influence somebody interested in that one. Okay, so the next one here. When you think about your next chapter, what excites you the most? Starting a new venture or project? Is it exploring new hobbies or passions? Or just more time with family and friends? Traveling and just having new experiences. So far, more time for family and friends, followed equally by new project, new hobbies and passions. Also something that is interesting, because again, it's typically focused on that the pursuit of more travel is what we assume that will be done. And that's why I try to always ask and not always make assumptions. So having more time with family and friends, that stands out. Wonderful. What's your biggest question about finding purpose in retirement? Are you curious about how you're going to structure your time meaningfully? Is it around figuring out what really matters to you? Or you're just not sure where to even begin in finding purpose in retirement? Balancing purpose with lifestyle freedom. Okay. I think Susan and Tony are taking notes, so that will help. Wonderful. Okay, the next one. How do you describe your current level of clarity about your purpose after you will retire? Do you feel that it's very clear to somewhat clear, have some ideas that you need to explore, followed by still figuring it out, which joining this, I think, is part of that journey for you. And we've got 17% that are very clear, which is very helpful. And just out of curiosity, have you worked with a financial planner in the past? Yes or no? And then after this, we've got one more, and then we'll certainly have you introduced to Susan Tony. So 82%, 77% yes. And final question is, how about a retirement coach? Okay. So no one has worked with a retirement coach and will, oh, okay.
Oh, there you go.
I have one, yeah. And you know, I'll add that there was a time where even the concept of a financial planner wasn't one that was mainstream. So we've been through that, and I think that's sort of where we're at now with retirement coach. You know, so it is something that we are in crowd. So let me start sharing, and do appreciate you sharing your thoughts. So today we've got Susan Williams, who's the founder of Booming Encore. It's a globally recognized entity on the authority about retirement, aging, and longevity. And we've got also Tony, who is a retirement coach, so you'll be able to sort of hear more about what that entails. And she's moved into that after a career that included being a director of financial planning and leading teams of financial planners and advisors. You know, and, you know, so beyond that sort of very high level, just, you know, I'm sure there's many other hats you've worn. If you don't mind, you know, Susan and Tony, just to introduce yourself and, you know, what else would you want to share with individuals about yourself?
Sure, Orlando.
Susan.
Tony, I'll start if that's okay.
So go ahead.
First and foremost, thank you so much for having us. Tony and I are delighted to be here. We love talking about this because we are both so passionate around, you know, helping people really understand the value of having a purpose in retirement. And just on that alone, I'm just going to share a little bit of research related to the value of having a purpose. It's actually been shown to, the research is starting to mount. It's actually been shown to reduce the risk of dementia. It actually increases your longevity. It actually also affects your health and the risk of actually having major incidents and health incidents. So that's why, you know, we get so passionate about having this conversation. As for myself, as you mentioned, I'm the founder of Booming Encore, and it's a digital media hub specifically dedicated to helping people create and live healthy, purposeful, and long lives. And so it's filled with resources specifically to help people do that. My personal background is I was actually a senior leader and executive in a number of different corporations for about 28 years. And when I actually left this and went out and started consulting with small and mid-sized organizations, a lot of them were actually talking about social media. So that we're going back about 13 years. And at that time, I had zero knowledge of social media. I didn't even have a Facebook account. I knew nothing about it. And being a bit of an experiential learner, I thought, okay, the best way for me to learn is through doing. And I was in my own sort of career transition. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. I knew retirement was on my, you know, sort of the threshold, but I wasn't ready to retire. And when I went actually looking for resources to help sort of plan this next stage of life, I came up completely empty. So going back to your point, you searched retirement planning and all you got was financial information. There was like zero information related to how to transition. And this is a major, you know, major milestone in somebody's life. And we're now looking at retirement being, you know, anywhere from 20 to 40 years. And so filling it is absolutely critical. And so I thought, okay, at the time, if I can't find it, I'll build it. So having no background whatsoever in social media, in you know, writing articles, in any of that, I actually launched it. And so for the first 5 years, I sort of did it under cloak and dagger. I kind of call it my professional affair. I would, consult during the day and then sneak off at night. And I would do this all under this guise of, somebody else. And I didn't tell anybody except for a few close family and friends, until it reached a point that it started picking up quite a bit of traction. And so at that point, I kind of let it out of the bag and sort of told everybody this is what I was doing. And as they say, the rest is history. So, this is a topic that's very near and dear to my heart. As I reflect back now, even though it wasn't necessarily something that I had originally thought I was going to end up doing, I'm absolutely loving it. And it's actually filling my day with a great level of satisfaction and purpose, so to speak. So that's sort of my story.
A pet project that has now become your purpose.
Exactly. Had no anticipation. Yeah, had no idea this is where I was going to end up. So anyways, a real quick snapshot of my background. I'm going to hand it over to Tony and let her share a bit of her story.
Thank you, Susan. And again, thank you, Orlando, for creating the space for us. So a little bit about myself. As you mentioned, I spent a little over 30 years in the financial industry, and then I decided to retire. And I did have a solid plan when both financially and lifestyle. So my wish was to launch my own coaching practice in retirement, and I did. I just wasn't sure of what niche I wanted to go into. And once I did retire, what I really wasn't prepared for were all the emotional shifts that came with retirement. And even though I had a solid plan, I knew exactly what I wanted to do in retirement. So things like questioning my identity and how do I fill my days, and deep reflection questions like that really took me off guard. And that's what really sparked me to launch my current practice, which is Retire with Intention. And the purpose is really helping others that are either in retirement or approaching retirement, and helping them navigate that little roller coaster that we call retirement. And but not only navigating it, making sure that you're thriving and you're happy. And my coaching is really all about real conversations and using practical tools to help design that lifestyle that matches what your dreams are. So that's a little bit about my practice. Who is Tony? Tony, when I'm not coaching, is I love reading, I love baking and cooking, anything in the kitchen. And I love eating everything I make. And I really like spending time with my family and my grandson. So looking forward to today's conversation. Thanks you for having us here.
Yeah. Well, here's a question for you then, for both of you. As you talked about your journey, what surprised you the most in the first year after retiring from the careers that you had?
For me, what I found most surprising was I had some really close friends at work that I thought for sure I would actually stay in contact with. But when it actually came down to it, it was really out of 15 people, it was maybe one that I ended up staying quite close with. And so I think that's the one thing that a lot of people really underestimate, because when you're in a working environment, you're working together every single day, and you're kind of, you're not forced, but you are every day you have those interactions. But when you're actually pulled away from that work continues on. They still have that necessity to keep going, and that's where they're interacting. And so to pull them outside of that environment is quite a different thing. So I learned that. And then I also learned that the friends that I had developed with my kids, for instance, through their extracurriculars, once their extracurriculars were gone, unless there was a real reason to stay in touch, you really need to kind of force that. So having that network, having that connection beyond your work environment and even beyond your kids, you really should start thinking about it sooner rather than later, because sometimes it can be a little bit more difficult to create those friendships later in life than, through these other vehicles that you're normally kind of thrown into.
For sure.
How about you, Tony? What was the biggest thing for you?
So for me, honestly, what surprised me, even though, as I mentioned earlier, I had a very clear plan of what I wanted to do in my retirement. And even with that, what surprised me the most was just how much I needed to process. There were so many layers of emotions that I had to get through and unpack. And as much as I was excited about the future, I really had to make space for a lot of this reflection. And that's what I really wasn't as prepared for. That's what surprised me. Because I thought I had a good financial plan, I'm aligned there, I have a good lifestyle plan, but I still had to unpack a lot of emotions and process a lot of this. So, things like the roles, the routines, and what's my daily rhythm going to look like. So that emotional layer is something that I had to really process. And I do see that often. That comes up a lot with my clients as well. And it's just a reminder that even a well-planned retirement is still going to take a little bit of focus, and that's completely normal. If you're feeling a little bit lost, a little bit disconnected, it's very normal, and those are just signs that you may want to start looking at working with someone or just reflecting on some of those questions. So for me, that was really the most what surprised me the most first year.
Well, what Susan mentioned in terms of the social network, and just the fact that, and especially it depends on when somebody retires. Somebody retires earlier than their colleagues, then also there's a bit of a, well, wait a minute, let's meet up for brunch or coffee. And they're like, wait, I'm working. I can't meet up and spend that time.
Yeah.
And my thought process, and again, fully open with everybody, I've not been through that myself. But again, just because of my practice, I see and I try to think. I try to encourage individuals that if you have the same thought process that, okay, Orlando, when I retire, I'm just going to play lots of golf. But then you actually don't golf currently, you're setting yourself up for a surprise, and maybe you want to try that sport gradually or pick about, and also not just for the technical know-how, but start being part of the community, knowing, which events or all these things. So you're starting to go at maybe 20 kilometers per hour. Then when you retire, you can accelerate is sort of what my thought process is, around that.
Orlando, can I share maybe just 30 seconds? Can I share a tip? Because that's a very, very important topic when we're talking, and it's one of the 4 pillars when you're looking at retirement lifestyle planning is social connection. So if I can take just 30 seconds to share a tip that could help a lot of our audience, when you're approaching retirement, and your world does get very small in retirement, and your relationships change. One tip that I always tell my clients is you want to start looking at those relationships that you have at work, so through your career, and start nurturing those and identify those that are what I call transferable into retirement. So identify those relationships, see which are transferable, because not all of them are in retirement, and then start nurturing those relationships so that when you do start your retirement, you're not starting it with a blank page for your social connections. You do have some that will transfer over, and you'll be able to begin with those.
No, that's a good one. That's a good one. Susan, yeah?
Sorry, I was just going to add, Orlando, the one thing you also really learn as you start to get older is that time is not limitless. So when you're younger, you think you're going to live forever. As you get older, you start to realize that time is actually one of your most important and valuable assets. And as a result, what we have also found through research is that on average, the average retiree takes almost 2.5 years to figure out what they want to do in retirement, which can sometimes lead to regrets because you start to realize, geez, I just wasted this time. So that's why Tony and I really emphasize, start thinking about this before you hit that point, rather than waiting. And then you start to do that time, because as you get older, you realize, you're getting, I hate to, but it's honest, you're getting closer to the finish line than you are to the start line. So you really want to use your time as valuably as you can. And so the sooner you start to think about this, the sooner you can start to put your plans in place, and the sooner you can start getting on with your, what we call your encore life, like what that next thing that you plan on doing.
Can I? I'm going to add something and circle back to what was in one of the polls where most people voted more time with family and friends. And I'm sort of I'm thinking, curious what your thoughts are. If that is the case, and if you've identified that this is important to you in retirement, then there's a fair assumption that it actually should be important to you right now, in the sense that finding a way to balance, and if there are things you could already incorporate with those family and friends. So maybe you are thinking that, okay, am I going to do, let's use those examples. You want to explore a new hobby, pickleball. Well, maybe try to do that pre-retirement with a family or a friend. So you're already not waiting until, well, when I get there, then I'll spend more time with my granddaughter, my grandchild, or whoever, right? So that's the other thing I think, people might sometimes lead to regret in that sense.
The other thing is, it's interesting. What I found in talking with people when they say that it's often being their first priority is because it's something that they felt was lacking while they're in their working lives. So it's actually, in fact, trying to make up for lost time. The challenge that I've also seen people then experience is like, I now have all this time that I want to spend with family and friends, but in actual fact, they don't necessarily have the time for you. So it's that sort of cats in the cradle kind of situation, to quote Cat Stevens. But it's something that I think a lot of people are trying to make up for. So yes, it should be a priority. If it's a priority, it should probably be a priority now, irregardless of retirement. So you may just want to even check your priorities. But it's also good to check in with the people that you're planning on doing this with to make sure that they're also aligned in supporting that, because that can also then become a disappointment if it's not.
And I completely agree, and I think that's an excellent question. And I'm not surprised by the answer that 50% want to spend more time. The actual question was to balance purpose with your family and friends, right? Because one of the challenges that we see there is a lot of new retirees want to spend more time with family and friends, and they have all this free time. But one of the challenges that they come across after, if they don't set proper boundaries, is people start allocating or calling on them for other tasks. And where you as the retiree may want to spend time with family and friends, but you want to be able to build purpose around that as well. So it's not about, are you free and can you watch the grandchildren? Are you free? Can you help me with this? There has to be, and the proper way to really manage that, if you want to maintain your purpose in retirement as well, is you really need to have solid conversations around setting boundaries and making things clear. It's funny because I wrote an interesting article for Booming Encore that a client had actually asked that question. And it's very surprising because then you end up having all this free time and you don't want to say no to anybody in your family or your friends, but you find yourself chasing a lot of their tasks, their purpose, and not yours. So just one tip in there as well.
It's an excellent point. Next thing you know, you're waiting for Amazon deliveries, or you're waiting, you're picking up things. So somebody else's time then can become, you're no longer, as Tony pointed out, you're no longer the master of your own domain, so to speak, because other people start to squeeze in. And use the analogy, you're retired, you've got time. So that's where you also need to make sure you've got a structured idea of what you want to do, and everybody that's in close to you has an idea and understands that that's what's important to you.
There's no misunderstanding that spending more time with family and friends didn't mean, okay, I'll be daycare 5 days a week and do all the pickups for the grandkids. Like,
getting back to, if it's what you want to do, fill your boots.
But
if
it
that's
might
what
not
you
be.
want to do. But if it isn't, and people start, kind of squishing into your time, and then that's when you start to get resentful. It's like, what do you think I am? You're concierge here.
So that's, if I may, I'm not sure if we're going to go into this later, Orlando, but what I usually tell clients that are struggling with that right now is, or they're afraid of that might happen, then I just tell them, one simple thing that you could do is just practice retirement. You know, just reframe a week or pretend, take a vacation time and pretend that it's envision yourself in retirement during that vacation time. So we'll call it practicing, right? And then if you're going to take that vacation time or reframe your weekends and pretend that it's your retirement lifestyle, you'll get a very good idea of how it will turn out and what the outcome will be. So you'll notice what your family and your friends, how they're going to respond to you being retired. And then you could adjust as you go along, and you know what you're prepared for. So practicing is just something that I often tell my clients that they could try doing that in advance.
Yeah. Okay. I'll add one more thing, and then I've got a new question for you both. I think what's been happening, which is sort of a new phenomenon, I've had a few clients where we've done sort of gap year planning. A few of them got a 40-year-old client who's took a year off. She's exited her role at TikTok and is taking a year off, and another guy was in his late 30s. So that was sort of, again, it wasn't phrased as them practicing retirement, but I do think that allowed them to sort of see, okay, what is this extended recreational time sort of like? And then they re-enter back the workforce, right? And I think sometimes that could be a different, way of looking at it. Depending on the stage that the person is at, do we just do one gradual work, or do we cut things up as we go, as life is evolving, right? Because your work, which is actually the next question I want to ask, our work sometimes gets tied into our identity. So, Joe the plumber, who's Joe when he's not plumbing anymore, right? Joe, is he lost, right? But so how did you navigate the emotional and the psychological shift after leaving your long-term careers?
So for myself, I would say that, like many professionals, right, my identity was very closely tied to my title, my role, and the fast-paced structure of my career. And when I left that behind and I retired, and as excited as I was about my retirement and launching my own practice, I really felt a sense of loss. And it was a lot deeper than I expected, right, as I said earlier. So I wasn't just adjusting for free time. I was really kind of struggling with the question of, so who am I without my work? And what really helped me navigate that shift is something that I allowed myself to do, and something I tell my clients, and that is, give yourself permission to pause. Give yourself some time to just, and space to reflect on some of the deep questions of, who am I now without my title? What really gives me meaning in life? What do my days look like? And that's really going to help you gradually reconnect with the parts of yourself that were dormant for a while. So I would really strongly suggest that if you are looking at navigating that emotional and psychological side, before jumping into anything or your next project, give yourself that little time, permission to pause and reflect on some of those questions.
Great answer, Tony. And as for me, I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people have is, like, they go out after they've retired, and too often we associate people with their work. So it's like, what do you do is the first question out of somebody's mouth. And answering that, and it's interesting to watch how people answer, because a lot of people say, I'm retired, but I used to do this, which then shows that they still have the attachment to their past identity and what they actually did and how much they felt connected to that. And I can actually speak for that firsthand, because I really struggled with my transition. As I mentioned, I did it like Booming Encore for 5 years under sort of this cloak of secrecy. Now, part of that was culturally back then, to moonlight was considered something nobody would ever do. I mean, you had your full-time job, and then if to do something else was, very uncommon. It meant that you weren't loyal to what you weren't really committed to what you had signed initially said you were. But what changed my mind was, I was at a conference, and this young woman from HR was talking to me about hiring and how they were hiring younger personnel who had slash careers. And this was a new term for me. So, and I said, slash careers, what's that? And she said, well, it's like a a business analyst slash barista or a yoga instructor slash dog walker. Because of underemployment, it ended up creating all these like dual sort of things. And they said, in actual fact, it showed them more of the personality of the people they were hiring and what interests they had. And so they were looking for people who had these multidimensional aspects of career rather than just being singular. And so for me, that was sort of a turning point for me. I thought, geez, I am stuck in the past. I'm stuck tied to something that I was, rather than thinking about what am I becoming. And then as I struggled with this sort of imposter syndrome, and then all of a sudden I started to realize, because I was like, who am I? I was never a writer. I was never, an influencer. I was never these things. But then I started to realize a lot of my skills were transferable. So I used to do a lot of presentations. I used to do a lot of research. I used to do a lot of relationship building. I mean, all of those skills that I had were now just being packaged and delivered differently. Plus I was learning new ones. So that's how I made my transition. I'll be honest, it took me a long time to kind of get my hand around it. And the funniest thing is, when I made that change on LinkedIn, that big professional site where everybody sees what you do, and I actually announced to the world that I was founder of Booming Encore, and I thought, okay, here it comes. And you know what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I know, that's hard.
And the reason being is that I was more concerned about what other people were thinking about me, when in actual fact they weren't thinking about me at all. And that's when I realized, we can be whoever we decide we want to be. Often we're more concerned about what other people are thinking, when in actual fact they're not thinking about us at all. So my advice to people is, stop thinking about what you were, start thinking about what you want to be. And then you can actually start making progress towards that. And Tony can easily walk you through how to actually go through that.
Which is how, Well, I'm going to touch on something you mentioned, because you touched on culturally the fact that it's so normal that we end up asking each other, well, what do you do, right? And I mean, I was at a networking event yesterday, and that comes up. I've been trying personally as well, and I did it yesterday. I then actually asked the other individuals, I said, and by the way, what do you do for fun when you're not coming to events like this? And it just sort of opened up a whole different, and I think and maybe I want to encourage those here to try that, because if you start looking at people not by just what they do 9 to 5, and the conversation we had when that was very different than if I just sort of asked, okay, likewise, where do you work and what do you do? Yeah. It just sort of led to a whole different. So I think we need to probably start seeing ourselves beyond just this, this one-dimensional area, and that might even help us with it as well.
Often what I'll ask is, what interests you? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you'll find out that people are grandparents, as Tony pointed out. I'm a grandparent as well, or, my family, or I love to play pickleball, as you mentioned, or, these are other interests. So we're all multidimensional. Unfortunately, culturally, as you mentioned, we tie ourselves to our professions. And it's actually understanding we are much more than that. And we are, parents, sisters, friends, all of these things make up for a full life.
So if I could just share as well, one quick story as well. That's such a true analogy that you did there, Susan. When I first retired, and I was so excited about going into retirement, I'm kind of old school. And I have to tell you that the first thing that I missed was not having a business card. Ooh. I know today it's a very different thing. I have 2 adult sons, and they're in their careers, and it's like, who carries a business card anymore? But I have to say that in my time, I just felt like it was part of my identity. It was that business card. So the first thing that I did when I retired, and I was in the middle of launching my practice, I just went out and I ordered business cards. And seriously, all I had on it was my contact info, my name, my email, and my phone number. And but it just felt good having that, saying that I have a business card. And again, that's how it gets ingrained in our DNA when we're spending 30 years of our lives growing our careers, right? So so good points, good points that we pick up here.
Well, how about misconceptions and myths? What do you think is one of the biggest myths people have about retirement?
So, yeah, I don't know if you want to go first, Susan, or I have a few. I have a few that I'll share very quickly then, right? So one of them is, and it's the biggest one, is just that if you're financially secure, then that automatically means that you're going to have a very fulfilling retirement. So, and the numbers do work. You do need to have a financial plan. But I always say that, and you mentioned this at the beginning in your introduction, Orlando, is for myself, the way I tell my clients is retirement planning has two parts. It has two components. It has the financial plan, and which takes care of all the money stuff and the funding. And you also have the lifestyle plan. And that takes care of making sure that you have purpose and meaning in your retirement. So in the common misconception is that I only need a financial plan and I'll be fine. And that's where a lot of retirees fall into a little bit of challenges, because it doesn't solve all of the issues that you're going to have. So money, or the financial plan, will solve money questions, but the lifestyle will answer a lot of the lifestyle questions and all the who am I in retirement. So that's one of the misconceptions. The second one is that, oh, I have a lot of time to plan for retirement. And what often happens there is they don't plan for it. And as you said at the beginning, is we take a lot of time planning for the financial side, but what often gets overlooked is the planning for the non-financial, or sometimes it doesn't even get planned. So that's one of the common misconceptions there as well, is that I'll have enough time, but you don't want to panic plan as well, right? You don't want it to be, oh, I'm 6 months away from retirement and now I'm starting to feel a little anxious. I'm starting to feel a little nervous because I don't know what my days in retirement are going to look like. And it's not to say that 6 months before you can't have a plan, but start earlier. It's a lot better in terms of building a really rock solid retirement plan, in my opinion. So watch out for those two.
Yeah. And just to kind of dovetail on a few of Tony's thoughts there, I would suggest that a lot of people think retirement is like going on a very long vacation. Which vacations are great, don't get me wrong. And quite honestly, 6 months when you retire, depending on the type of work you're leaving or whatever, you often do need that decompressing time, sort of just a time to relax, not have a schedule, not be tied to a specific to-do list. But majority of people after that period, they call it the honeymoon stage for a reason. It's all fun until then you wake up one day, and that's where the value of purpose comes in. Like, we're continually trying to help people understand you need a reason to get out of bed in the morning, and that's really what your purpose is. So without having it, your days start to feel unstructured. You start to feel like you're not achieving anything. You start to feel adrift. You don't feel like you're connected, and then it can send you into a spiral that you don't necessarily want to get into. And so that's why, we are such advocates for starting to think about this before you actually hit that point or that stage, because it's much nicer to think about the opportunities rather than I've got to dig myself out of this hole. And so that's why, there's some great resources out there. We've got a couple of books, for instance, to download on Booming Encore. Tony's got some great guides that she's got available. So these are all resources that are available to start you thinking about it, earlier rather than later. And the more time you do, then the happier chances you're going to be, because you're going to be able to experience the retirement you're really looking for.
Yeah. So we've really, and I think we've gotten folks to understand the why this is important. In terms of how, what would you suggest as one small step somebody listening could take this week towards building a more purposeful retirement before we open up for questions?
So one of the suggestions that I often share with any of my clients that are in the pre-retirement stage is really, you have to take a little bit of time, like I said earlier, and look at some of those deep questions. So what energizes me? What's my passion? Who do I want to spend time with in my retirement? Who's going to be in my social circle? What do I want my daily rhythm to look like? So what do I want my next chapter to look like? Just sit down and really reflect on some of those questions. Because if you can do that, then it really will give you a very good indication of where you have it all figured out and where you need a little bit more help, either figuring it out yourself or with the help and working with someone. And what we said earlier, I would say, do practice retirement. Take a couple of weeks and pretend that you're retired. Put it in your calendar, and really envision, yourself in retirement during those 2 weeks. What would you do? How full is your agenda? What would you do for breakfast, lunch, and supper? What would you do to keep yourself busy? And who is there with you? So if you can do that and just do a little test drive or a practice run, it will really shed a lot of light in terms of what are some of the areas that you might be struggling in, or how to prepare for it. So that's what I normally tell my clients.
And there's one that I would, great thoughts there, Tony. One that I would definitely add is also, if you have a partner or a spouse, start talking to them.
Yes.
You would be surprised that there's an old line, which I think is quite funny, but has an element of truth. I married you for life, not for lunch. There is there is this expectation that everybody's going to just go along with what, and I have seen so many, couples that all of a sudden, I had no idea that's what you wanted to do, or I didn't realize you wanted to spend all your time with me. Like,
right.
It can create, and that's why I hate to say it, but I think that's why we're also seeing, an increase in what they call silver divorces, or, silver separation, because the couples are not necessarily aligned in what they're wanting in this later stage of life. And we're not talking short term now. I mean, like I mentioned at the beginning, 20 to 30 years is a long time to spend with somebody. And if you're not aligned on what you're planning on doing, it can make it for a very difficult, difficult living arrangement.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. And I'll now let's open it up for questions. You shared a lot of good nuggets, but I want to also give the opportunity for those that have joined that have questions that we might have thought of. So there is an option to raise your hand, and I will unmute you, so feel free. We are just a few minutes before 1, and I'll keep an eye out to see if there's any questions that you have for Tony or for Susan in what we've discussed today. And as you sort of embark on your journey, or for those who are already retired, that are sort of, at a different stage. So let me just keep an eye. All right, here. And while we're doing that, and actually, here's one of the questions that we did have. What questions should people in the room be asking themselves right now about their future purpose?
Sorry, that was about their future purpose?
Yeah, what questions should they be asking themselves?
So, sorry, was that directed at any one of us, or anybody in particular?
Yeah.
Okay. The way I would answer that, and what I tell, that's a great question, by the way, because I think right there it means that you're on the right track. What I normally tell clients who are asking that question, because it does come up very often, is start looking at, be curious about yourself. Start really digging deep and finding out, what are some passions that I kind of put away and I buried while I was busy building my life, my career, and my family. I know that's what I did, right? There was the true Tony that was inside of me that I kind of buried because I had my family and my career and my life to build. And then when I retired, I had to go back and look for her. So be very curious about yourself. Find out, like I said earlier, what excites you? What really fills your day, and what makes you forget to have lunch during the day, right? Those are passions. I don't know about you, but when I'm really doing something that I'm very interested in, I forget to have lunch. And you really want to pursue those kind of passions. Ask yourself, who do I want to spend time with in retirement? Or a purpose in particular then is, what did I like to do when I was a child and that I put away and I want to bring it back? What are my skill sets? What am I good at? What are my strengths? So ask yourself those kind of questions, and it'll really help you find that inner compass that will bring you towards purpose.
There's also a model that I absolutely adore, which is called Ikigai. It's a Japanese model, and it's specifically around, you know, your reason for being. And it's really made up of four components. So it's what do you love? What are you good at? What the world needs, and what you can get paid for. And then I often in retirement say pay we often associate with money. It doesn't necessarily mean that. It means intrinsical value, like what makes you feel good, what makes you feel like you're contributing. And if you can start thinking about those four different elements and where do they all sort of connect, and what does that actually look like for you, that's often a really good place to start.
Perfect.
Yeah, I do like, and I think part of the literature around retirement and purpose, they sort of zeroed in on studying certain parts of the world, Japan being one of them, and just how they approach that. And I mean, for me also growing up, my grandparents, my granddad, who was one of them, was a farmer. He just continued farming. Like, it was just something that he would kind of go out into the field. And so the concept of pausing or stopping doing an activity that is giving value to the community is just something that was sort of foreign. And it was, and again, I think finding that thing that you can do that you may not be compensated with, you know, a direct deposit.
Yeah.
But then, and again, also the financial plan helps to get you to the point where you have the option to say, okay, do I invoice or I don't need to invoice? I'm going to, I don't need to invoice for teaching, this young person this, or for mentoring. Like, I can choose to do it, and just their gratitude alone is their way of paying or compensating you, right? Their appreciation.
Great question. And I think we're seeing that more and more these days in terms of the new mindset towards retiring or taking a little bit of time off. So my question or my advice to them would be, if you have half of the equation already figured out and you know that financially you're solid, so we know that there aren't going to be any anxieties around, can I fund my retirement? Then I would go ahead and just say, you're ready to start looking at what does the second half of that equation look like. So before jumping into anything though, and as much as they have a solid plan, do they have a really good vision of what that, so they're in their 40s. And with the way longevity is right now, they're going to need to fund that for the next 50 years, right? So we said financially they're okay. But then you have to also envision yourself on the lifestyle side. Do I have everything figured out that will satisfy me and sustain me for the next 50 years? So am I ready to give up whatever my career was bringing to me in terms of structure, social connections, even well-being, both physical, mental, emotional, social? Are you prepared to replace that with something else for the next 50 years? And that's where they need to ask those questions. And if they have a really good roadmap for that, then I'd say, let's look at it together. And let's look at some of the areas that you have figured out really well. And let's look at some other areas that maybe need a little bit more adjustments. And once that is all complete, then I say you have both components for a really good retirement lifestyle plan. And I'd say, congratulations and have fun. But I would definitely go down that avenue in terms of understanding and breaking it down. There's a lot to unpack there, right? There's, like we said, the passions. Can I sustain it? Maybe fast forward and look at yourself in the next 20 years from now. Will I be happy? Will I be happy not having that structure? And I would say the best thing is figure out what it is that brings you the most joy out of what you're doing now, and make sure that you have a plan to replace that with other things that bring you joy for the next 50 years. So that's what I would tell them. And I tell them I'm kind of jealous because they could retire at 40. That's perfect.
I think trying it, like if you do not know exactly what you want to do, trying things is always good. Because what you will find out is what you do enjoy and what you don't enjoy. So you'll start to put things on the table that you enjoy, start to take things off the table that you don't enjoy. And often, you know, that's where that whole idea of test driving your retirement. Ideally, if you can do it before you retire and you already know what you would like to do, it can make things in the transition much easier. The other thing is what you'll often find is the things that you enjoy, you'll end up associating with other people with similar interests. And those are the ones that you typically will, you know, develop relationships and have friendships with, which will also then feed your social circle. But as you mentioned, Joanne, you can overload. So you got to be somewhat realistic, because the last thing you want to do is then be too thin and then not get the full experience, and you may then end up discounting things without having given it a good try. So, you know, maybe start off with one or two things rather than, you know, loading up your plate with shrimp completely. Maybe try, you know, having a little bit of variety on your plate first, and then seeing what you like, and then taking the things off that you don't enjoy and possibly adding something on if you still have space for it. I hope that helps.
Is that why it's important to even encourage individuals in their 40s way early to be able to, you're spacing it out then, right? So you're not necessarily deciding or trying to do it at the 13th hour and then you're loading up. So again, you know, for anyone on it, I think 50s, 40s, start thinking about it so you can go into that space and realize, no, okay, but not really for me. And then you're not sort of trying to take on too much all at once. I think might be.
Yeah, Orlando, yeah, agree. I mean, I think the thing is that we should all, what we've learned through this process is we should all really have interest beyond just our work anyways. You know, so we mentioned, you know, family and friends, if they're really a priority, they should be a priority now. We should have other interests. It helps make us better, well-rounded individuals. We don't get as attached to our identity, only to our work. It starts to give us our lives a little bit more balance. And one of the best suggestions I got, I know when I was coming up through my career, was from a gentleman around work-life balance. And he said, you really need to have things outside your work that you really look forward to, that balances out your work. So this kind of falls into that same space. So, I mean, if you can find something you really enjoy, great, go for it now. You don't need to wait until retirement. Why not test it now? And chances are you may actually find a group of people that you enjoy spending time with before you actually retire, which is a bonus, you know?
Good.
Yeah, wonderful. And I just put up on the screen just the ways to get in touch with you. In terms of your contact, you mentioned a couple of tools as well, so we can probably send that out as well, like workbook as well. And, you know, I want to thank everyone that joined. There's a number of other questions. There's one person that asked the question, how do you deal with the guilt of saying no to things like babysitting, right? So there's
yes, that's a very popular one.
Yeah, and just in the interest of time, you know, more questions we could have gone through. I realize some people put some questions in the chat, but nonetheless, this is just the start. We want this to be a little bit of a spark that you continue to do some research, leverage your resources. Feel free to reach out to myself or to Susan or Tony. And again, you know, we're all trying to figure out just how to navigate this wonderful thing called life. So with that, you know, I'm going to close, and I want to thank you both, Susan and Tony, for being so gracious in the idea about this conversation, doing it as a fireside chat, which is a new one for me, but I really enjoyed it, and I think it went well for everyone.